So, I just saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and before I give my thoughts, I guess I should say what I thought about the other Ghostbusters movies. The original Ghostbusters is one of my favorite movies of all time. I genuinely rewatch it every Halloween. It's a movie I just do not get tired of. I absolutely love it. Love the characters, love the effects, love the story, love the comedy. It's just a great movie overall. I actually have never seen Ghostbusters 2. It's one of those movies I've been meaning to watch for a while, but I've just never gotten around to it. I also did not see the reboot, like most people, and Ghostbusters Afterlife, I know got a lot of mixed reception, but personally, I thought it was really good. I had a great time with it. I thought it was a great evolution of the series. I thought the characters were great. I liked the comedy, liked the story, liked the action. It was an overall good time. And now we have this one, which I believe is the lowest rated Ghostbusters movie ever so far, and I can kind of understand why, but personally, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty solid movie. It's not a masterpiece. It's definitely the weakest of the three I've seen, but as it stands, I still think it's a decent movie. So the movie takes place a couple of years after the events of Ghostbusters Afterlife, which, in case you were unaware, was about Egon Spengler's family, that being his daughter Callie and her two kids, Trevor and Phoebe, discovering the history of the Ghostbusters and finding out all of this was real, and now ghosts are coming back, so they have to deal with that. So this movie takes place a couple of years after that, where they've now gone to New York City, where the originals took place, and they've moved into the firehouse, and they're the new Ghostbusters, obviously. They're dealing with ghosts throughout the city, along with Gary, Allie's boyfriend, who was also the kid's science teacher. The movie opens with them chasing down this, ghost dragon or whatever, and they do manage to catch the ghost, but of course, a lot of property is damaged, so the mayor is not too thrilled about this. And who is the mayor in this movie? Why, the one and only Walter Peck from the original. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, he still has no dick. Obviously, Peck is not too happy about this. He's never been a Ghostbusters fan, and that's putting it lightly, so he tells them, all of you are thin ice, and Phoebe especially cannot be a Ghostbuster anymore because she's a minor, and naturally, she is not thrilled about this. But while this is going on, their friend, who doesn't actually have a name, he just calls himself Podcast because he has a podcast. Yeah, I don't get it either, but he has now started a business with Ray Stantz from the original, Dan Aykroyd's character, and they're basically investigating old paranormal stuff that people bring in, and this one guy named Naveed brings in a box of old stuff that his grandmother gave to him, and the one they really find an interest in is this strange orb that has serious paranormal powers in it. They're not entirely sure what it is, but they know something's up with it, and they end up taking it to this, ghost research facility and discover that inside the orb is the spirit of this ancient ice god that almost destroyed the world thousands of years ago, but it was then sealed away by what we later find out is Naveed's ancestors, and it's basically been passed down through the generations, but now it's at risk of coming back, so obviously they need to find something to deal with it. I'm gonna say right now, the story is the weakest aspect of this movie. It's not terrible, but it doesn't really do that much unique or interesting from the previous movies. There are some interesting elements, which I'll get more into a bit, but I'll just say right now, most of them don't really go anywhere, and the pacing is a little off. We don't really find out what's the deal with the orb until, at least 30-40 minutes in. This movie definitely jumps around a lot of the place, which isn't terrible, but it feels a little unfocused. But thankfully, the movie is very much carried by its characters. Like I said, the characters in this movie are all really good. You can identify with the struggles that all four of the main leads are going through, especially Phoebe and the dynamic with her mom and also Gary. If there's one thing I can really praise about both this movie and the last one, it is the acting. Especially the girl playing Phoebe absolutely nails it. She is very much Egon's granddaughter. She is the exact same type of delivery that he had, but still is enough to feel like her own character, and it's fantastic. Obviously, Trevor's pretty solid. Callie and Gary are both very likable. I like the relationship that Gary and Phoebe had in this, how he's kind of trying to be the father figure that she never had, but he isn't sure whether to be the cool, fun dad like he used to be, or whether to toughen up more, which I really enjoy it. I like the dynamic that they have in this movie. And the one thing this movie does much better than Ghostbusters Afterlife was the comedy. Afterlife still had some decent laughs in it, but for the most part they tried to play everything a lot more serious, which was good. It worked for that, but with this one, there are so many great jokes in this. I swear, me and almost everyone else in the theater got a ton of laughs. It was hysterical. Of course, the biggest complaint with Ghostbusters Afterlife was the excessive amounts of fan service. Now, a lot of the time it just felt shoved in your face, and for the most part, I didn't mind it that much, but there were a few moments where I did roll my eyes, and there was one time I audibly groaned, but I think that was intentional. This one, it's not as bad. There are still a few moments of that, like there is one I'm kind of rolling my eyes at, but again, I think it's intentional. Basically, Gary starts saying lyrics from the Ghostbusters theme to Callie, but he's clearly like trying to inspire her or whatever, and even then she's just straight up like, get out, stop. Like, I think that's one you're supposed to kind of laugh at, but also kind of roll your eyes, so I'm pretty sure it's intentional. At the very least, there are some fan service moments that do work. There's two in particular I really enjoy. One is we finally see Slimer come back, and he has this little kind of on and again, off again rivalry with Trevor, and that was pretty funny. Doesn't happen that much, but the few scenes we did get were pretty good, and it leads to a phenomenal payoff in the climax, which I won't spoil. And the other is there's a scene where they're exploring this old library, and of course, Ray sees the same ghost that they saw at the beginning of the original movie, and like, that is hilarious. That is a fantastic callback right there. The effects in this movie are overall pretty solid. It is impressive how far we've come from the original movie, which had definitely good effects for the time, but some of them can be a little dated. This one looks fantastic. The ghosts, the proton packs, even some of the practical effects, they all look really good. This is a very well done action movie. I had a great time with those scenes. There's two aspects of this movie I think could have used a little more focus. One is Ray and Winston, like I said earlier, have been using their funding over the years to create a ghost research facility, and we see a lot of cool stuff they have. There's some cool devices that they're testing. They've trapped some of the ghosts in containment units, and they're studying them, and we get some pretty interesting stuff. Like, there's this one little guy that has a great design, and he barfs out slime. There's another ghost that can possess inanimate objects, and they do some really fun stuff with that. But not just from, I mean, the ghost itself has a pretty simple design, but the things it possesses, especially the way those objects move, they do some really great stuff there. That is very fun. But again, we don't see that much of it, but the few things we do see are pretty solid. And the other thing I wish could have used a little more focus is early on, Phoebe goes outside, and she winds up playing chess with like this ghost girl who becomes a reoccurring character throughout the movie, and I enjoyed the dynamic they had, but I wish they got a bit more focus. Like, I feel like that's an interesting idea, like a human and a ghost befriending each other. Like, that could have been really clever, but sadly they didn't do that much with her. Again, she's a decent enough character, but I felt like there was some missed potential there. The villain is also a mixed bag. I mean, I guess, mild spoiler, it's in the trailer, so I don't mind spoiling that, but yes, he does escape the orb, and his design is pretty cool. Admittedly, his powers are kind of uninteresting, but the one thing that really piqued my curiosity with it is, and again, this is in the trailers, when Ray's describing, like, what his powers are like, and how he can literally freeze you from the inside, and just listening to that, I was kind of like, ooh. Yeah, it is legit creepy to think about, but it's done very well. And the climax of the movie is overall pretty solid. I won't give too much away, but I will just say the guy who ended up giving them the orb, Naveed, who honestly might be the funniest character in the movie, like, he has some really great lines, ends up being integral to how they need to defeat the villain, and I think that's a pretty funny idea. Like, just this random guy discovers, oh shit, I have this, like, really great power, and I need to use it, or else the entire world's gonna end. Like, and again, not only is it an interesting idea, but it leads to some really great laughs, and also some really cool moments, so I thought that was a lot of fun. So, in the end, this isn't an amazing movie. There are some aspects that are a little underwhelming and could have used a bit more expanding on, but overall, I had a really fun time watching this movie. The characters are great, the acting's pretty solid, the writing's fantastic, the action scenes are fun, and there was just enough to keep me engaged in the story. I'm glad I saw it, and I definitely watch it again. I give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a 7 out of 10.